This is Brent Richardson, and welcome to the Business Minutia Podcast, where our focus is on the details of business that are often passed over by traditional classes and leadership training. We focus on the stories of real people who have tried, failed, and learned through their experiences and are willing to share their lessons with others.
Brent, I don't think you've ever actually told people what Business Minutia is actually about. Where'd that name come from?
Oh, I guess if anybody who knows me really well knows that if I'm in the middle of an argument or discussion or an exchange of differences on ideas, if I'm wrong, what do I typically say?
Minutia.
So if you hear me say that, that probably means I'm wrong. And so when we talked about putting the podcast together, it was really around sharing things that I wish I'd known, around the details of what I wish I'd known. I think then you said, oh, you're talking about the details of business that you wish you'd known. And that's kind of where you see a lot of the language that comes out now is your gift with words and my
we work together pretty well.
My gift of screwing things up and learning the hard way.
But Brent, that all comes from a journey of self-awareness, which is what we're actually talking about this week.
Yeah, and when you talk about self-awareness, like how about we talk about it, but we did not equip people with tools until now. And now if we're going to talk about what tools to use, why don't we use something that's thousands of years old, but's really made a huge resurgence in the last maybe 50 years, and is probably the hot item that people use now. So we wanted to bring you an expert and a specialist in that area, and that's called the Enneagram.
This week we talked to Marianne Connor, and her website is pathwaystoyou.com. And she specializes in reading and understanding the Enneagram test. That can be found at enneagraminstitute.com. It breaks down each of the 9 personality types, what they're good at, what their fears are, and how they can improve. And Marianne can help walk you and us through all 9 personality types.
Take the test, take a listen, learn a little bit about this, and go poke into it. This can be a painful journey, but this is a great journey and worthwhile to take. I wish everyone would do it. Enjoy, folks.
So I am from Dallas. I'm a true Texan, and I have spent the last 16 years of my life working in ministry, full-time ministry, and coaching people along the way. I have learned from being in ministry that it's very satisfying to me to help other people. And so a couple of years ago, I got involved with getting a coaching certification so that I could actually help people solve some issues that they had, or I kind of walk through some things with them. And so as I was getting my coaching certification, I took a course about assessments, of what assessments to use for helping people in coaching environments. And from that class, we took like 8 or 10 different assessments, everything you've heard of, the main ones like DISC and Myers-Briggs and Strengths Finders and all those things. And when we came to the Enneagram, it just kind of kicked me, really kind of got my attention because it resonated with me more than any of the other assessments. I felt like it absolutely called me out for who I was.
Wow.
And it got my attention. So I have been using the Enneagram in my coaching business for a while now, and I am a certified Enneagram coach. And so it's just given me an opportunity to help people understand who they are and why they were put on this earth.
Yeah. So I've seen in the last maybe 5 years a lot more use of Enneagram, even though it's been around for centuries probably.
Absolutely.
But I've seen a lot more use of it recently, and it caught my attention, especially with, Donald Miller and other people who talk about it. They'll introduce themselves as I'm a type 4 or whatever. And that caught my attention. I'm like, all right, maybe I should poke into this a little bit more. And I'll admit, and listeners would know I'm a little bit of a skeptic and a cynic just in general. And so I'm familiar with Myers-Briggs. I think I've taken that one 4 or 5 times. And I don't know that, the concept has always been good, but I always felt like it oversimplified things. It kind of created these little dichotomy buckets that, I naturally just reject anything. We're talking before the podcast, we're recording. Anything that's like, these are the 5. Okay, come on. Yeah. There's not 5. Yeah. Come on. But I also know that, we have to put things in buckets to make it simple for people to process and understand. But maybe talk a little bit about what's the difference between, what is it about the Enneagram that differentiates versus these other tools that are out there?
Absolutely. You mentioned that you feel like the Enneagram is kind of getting a new resurgence in our culture. We're hearing about it more. It actually didn't come to the United States until about the 70s.
Okay.
And so now that's about 50 years. But Ian Morgan Cron recently wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Road Back to You. And he really took the Enneagram and made it more mainstream and took this complex thing that the Enneagram is, and he simplified it. And I think that really is exciting to people when they can come across something that is simple. They remember a number, they remember a name that's associated with the number. And when it absolutely resonates with you, then you can get excited about that because you feel known for the first time, maybe. You asked me, what is the difference between Enneagram, what sets it apart, and that sort of thing. And I will tell you that it absolutely is a tool to use for your own personal transformation because it has movement, it has legs. And what I mean by that is I talk to people all the time and, you know, they talk about Myers-Briggs. And so I say, okay, what are your letters? And they're like, well, I think I'm an I, J, and they really struggle. And then the next question is, okay, when you learned your Myers-Briggs, what happened?
Yeah.
What do you mean what happened?
Yeah.
Nothing.
I felt like backed into a corner.
It might have given you some relief. Oh, I am an introvert.
Sure.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But you didn't do anything with it usually. The Enneagram is different in that it does not shy away from truth and honesty about what's driving you from the inside.
Yeah.
And it is very clear about where your strengths are. We want that, of course, but it's also honest about what your weaknesses are and what is your struggle. And so you are probably the only one that really knows your innate struggle.
Sure.
And you're behaving in a way to either run away from that or move towards something that you desire, run away from your fears and move towards your desires. And you're motivated by different things. And so the Enneagram tells you what are your 9 motivations.
Okay.
And so it's a very complex tool. The more you get into it, you learn about all the different layers, like peeling back an onion, but it is simplified when you find your number and you go, oh, I'm this number, and that means this.
It's like an onion.
It is. And so you say to me, I'm an X number.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say your number yet, but I immediately kind of know you a little bit better because I can remember what those 9 numbers are.
Yeah.
So,
one of the things that I struggled with Myers-Briggs, and I kind of, I'd say in the last 10 years just kind of rejected it and stopped paying attention altogether, was that it seemed like every 4 or 5 years I took the thing and I got a different answer. So it didn't seem to be, now you could, and I would challenge, facilitators or instructors about that. And they would say, well, yeah, you're changing and you're adapting and you're blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of, again, okay, maybe it's possible that's the case. I'm sure that is true. I'm not sure your 30 questions is really properly capturing that. But I think that's one of the things that I did notice here is it, right away, I was skeptical with this as well.
Okay, that is completely fine.
And I did take the test.
I received your skepticism.
I did. I took the test, and then I read just a couple of things about that style and type, and I was like, dang it.
Oh, really?
There, it got me. So then it becomes okay. Well, I think your point about getting to the core of what's really motivating and creating those things, which, we talk about on the podcast, the value of self-awareness and how, even with, we were discussing one of the other episodes a few minutes ago before we were recording about this analogy that I'd heard years ago about the most difficult culture to understand is yours because you don't see it as your culture.
Right.
It is just gospel. It is just how things are. And I think the same, I draw the same analogy to self-awareness. It's not just a cultural thing. It's how you're wired and how your style is. And I want to be able to lead all kinds of people. I want to be able to interact and work with all kinds of people. And the key for me, I found, to do that was understanding me first.
Absolutely.
If I didn't understand me, so I'm excited about this and again, there's no way we're going to cover all of the content in one episode, but to introduce the idea to people and let them, because we're giving people a tool, at least with something we've talked about, but now we're actually giving people a tool to try to get a little more self-awareness.
Yeah.
So
let me just tell you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but on that note, let's just be honest. It takes a lot of courage to be self-aware.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And until you're ready to find that courage and be brave to really dig around and find out who you are.
Yeah. It's painful.
Not everyone's ready for that.
Yeah.
But I found a quote from Warren Bennis about leadership. He says, becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. It is precisely that simple and also that difficult. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's pain involved with that because there's things you don't want to recognize. You want to overcompensate or, whatever. But yeah, absolutely. I think the importance of self-awareness and having a growth mindset is imperative for a leader of any kind. So
let's jump into how does this apply in the business world, right? So why do business leaders, certainly as a leader, I care about leading myself. I think it's a great way to, certainly can relate to that. But for listeners out there and they're running small businesses or they're in the corporate world doing something, what's the value of them diving into this? Like, is it something that you typically do with teams? Is it only individuals? How does that work?
I think you can do it either way. I think if you're a manager of people, it's important for you to understand who the people are that you're managing and what is motivating them and where they're coming from. The more you can know what those motivations are, the better it is for your team and for the general outcome and the general morale of the culture that you have in your office. But I think the Enneagram starts with yourself first. There are a lot of corporations right now bringing Enneagram experts in to meet with their teams and to consult, how are y'all working together and how does this person bring these strengths versus, this other person is this. And so that sort of thing. I really believe that if you are managing people or leading people in any way whatsoever, you're not just directing them, you're also developing them. And when you can help your loved ones or your coworkers develop themselves, it's a huge gift.
Let's describe for listeners a little bit, or you please describe the types, right? So just for people who've never heard of this before, give us an idea. Maybe we just go through the types and talk a little bit about them.
Okay, well, what I'm going to give you today is just a snapshot. We could talk about this for days and days. There's so many layers. There's so many aspects that the more you get into it, you're going to hear about wings, you're going to hear about centers of intelligence, you're going to hear about triads, you're going to hear about subtypes and all those things. We're not talking about any of that today. All we're going to talk about is some certain things about each type that maybe will help you resonate with yourself.
Okay.
And the quickest way I can just tell you really quickly about the 9 types, and maybe you'll hang in there with us, is if you let me tell you about each of the types' needs.
Okay.
Each type has a core need, and it has a core descriptor. So if you know and you can remember that the type 1 needs to be perfect, that the type 2 needs to be needed, that the type 3 needs to be successful, that the type 4 needs to be unique, that the type 5 needs to have all the knowledge, if you can remember that the type 6 needs security, and the type 7 needs to have fun, the type 8 needs to be in control or have control, and the type 9 needs to have harmony.
And the type 7 is the best of the group, right?
Absolutely. We got to have fun. We got to have those 7s who are making it fun.
Right. So I did go take this test, and I am a type 7. I was a little surprised initially when I saw it. I was like, nah.
Yeah.
Nah. And then the more I read it, I was like, all right, like you said, somebody read my mail.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, fine.
Yeah.
And then my skepticism turned to anger at being wrong, I guess. I was like, I put it away. I'm not looking at this.
Sometimes you got to try it on for a little bit and then take that jacket off and try something else. And then, eventually you'll come back to really, the truth will reveal itself. It does make itself known.
Let's talk a little bit about each one. And describe a little bit of that.
Okay, so as I go through this, just keep in mind, it's human nature for you to hear me talk about each of these types and find somebody in your life that sounds like that, right?
Yeah, right.
You're automatically going to go, oh my gosh, that's Susie who I work with, or that's my brother, or, blah, blah, blah. There is a warning that I need to share with everybody. Anytime we talk about the Enneagram, we must warn against trying to type other people.
Yeah.
It's really up to the individual to find their own type. Yep. It would be really wrong for me, even as a coach, to sit down with you and say, oh, you're this.
Sure.
You're a 7.
Right.
well, I don't know that you're a 7.
Very dangerous.
All I know
Yeah.
is the behavior you're presenting to me.
Right.
I do not know the underlying reasons until I sit down with you and begin to ask specific questions
Yeah.
and listen for patterns in language and all that sort of thing. As a coach, that's
Right.
what I would do.
Right.
But just try to hold back and be kind about, listening to this podcast and then running home to say, oh, I just heard this thing about you and, you're this, and your friends are going to be very alarmed by that. It's not nice.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is to remember is that when you do maybe find your type, don't sit in it and say, well, that's just the way it is.
Right.
Because if you choose to just say, well, deal with it, I'm never going to change.
Yeah.
How sad is that for you as a human?
Right.
You're missing the point of the Enneagram completely if you are not willing or
Taking
ready.
action of some kind.
Yes,
Yeah. Right.
to really see the truth and move toward freedom.
Right.
And healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So let's start with the type 1.
Let's do it.
All right. So our type 1s are known as the perfectionistic reformers. And I said earlier, they have a need for perfection. They are hard workers. They're very ethical and they're very responsible. But their point of focus is on quality, efficiency, and perfection. And that is coming from this fear of being wrong, of being irresponsible or inappropriate. They're motivated to strive for excellence and virtue in everything they do, and they're oriented around making things better, and that includes their own self-improvement and the world around them. So what happens with the type 1 is they have such a strong critical voice inside their heads that are constantly berating them and telling them they're not good enough, they're not pretty enough, they're not strong enough, whatever it is, that they have these really high expectations of themselves. They also want to keep their environment really perfect. And then they start projecting that onto you and the people that are around them.
Yeah.
And they begin, this is an unhealthy one.
Yeah.
They begin to have really high expectations, and they're frustrated with you that you don't also have the same high expectations.
Yes.
And this can show up at work, right?
Oh, yes. I work with lots of engineers that are type 1 that make you want to pull your hair out.
Okay.
Yeah.
You think they're type 1s. You don't know
I'm
that
projecting.
But the core weakness that the 1 really struggles with on an ongoing basis is resentment.
Sure.
They are frustrated with themselves. They're frustrated with you. They're frustrated with the world. They need balance, and the world is not balanced right now. And so the resentment is an ongoing struggle for them that they are constantly dealing with.
Okay.
But even in the midst of, these kind of negative aspects of a 1, remember that 1s make great leaders because they're leading by example. And why are they leading by example? It's because they've already figured out how to do it the right, most efficient, correct way. They love black and white. It's either black or white. They're right or wrong. So because they're reformers, they're wanting to make things better for you, and their motivation is to help you also be better. One of the things that I wanted to share today is if you are a 1 in the workplace, then there are a couple things you might struggle with, and we can kind of talk through some ways for them to find relief from that. So sometimes a 1 may struggle with focusing too much on quality. And an example of that would be going past the deadline because you need it to be perfect, where the rest of your team is now they're frustrated because they're like, come on, we got to get this done.
Yeah.
And you're in the weeds.
Sure.
Right? That's not always
Right.
good. And so they might be driving others crazy because they need 100% versus when an 80% could be just as good to get the product out the door or whatever.
Right.
So a type 1 leader needs to learn to loosen up the need for that highest level of quality and perfectionism.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. Another struggle may be that they may not want to delegate, or they may really struggle to delegate, giving things away that they know they can do
I could
the
definitely see
best
that.
way.
Yeah. Because there's usually 5 or 6 ways to do anything.
There
right?
is always 5
Yeah.
or 6 ways to do
Right.
anything. The struggle is the 1 doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Or if they know it, they've
Or
forgotten
an
it.
unhealthy one. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
they've forgotten it. And so a growing, maturing 1 is remembering, okay, just because I think I know the right way to do it doesn't mean that my coworker doesn't also have a good idea. Let's listen to her idea also.
Sure.
And so 1 really needs to be generous and stop themselves when they
Sure.
feel like they're the only ones that know how to get it done.
Sure. And then if I'm working with folks that are this way, it's good to know and be aware that, okay, it's really driven out of a core almost insecurity of I'm never good enough.
Absolutely.
And when I see things that way, I operate with a little more grace.
Hopefully.
With those folks, a little more empathy.
Yes.
And I see things, if I can recognize through their lens, then which gives me the agility to lead type 1s.
There you go.
Yeah.
See?
Okay.
I love that.
I get it.
Yeah. So you want to move on to number 2?
Type 2s.
Type 2s need to be needed. They are known as our helper or our befriender. These people are fun-loving and upbeat personalities. Man, they are great at hospitality. They know how to welcome you into their home and make you feel comfortable right away, and they are offering you everything from lemonade to a cold beer, everything. They're focusing on the needs of others because they're highly relational oriented. They are people pleasers. Okay, and so that is coming from their core fear of being worthless or unwanted. They actually struggle believing that in order for them to get their own needs met, they have to meet your needs first, that you will give them what they need if they take care of you first.
That sounds dangerous.
Yes, it can be. They definitely need to be liked and approved by others.
Okay.
That's a strong motivator. And so what happens is pride can be a weakness for them because a unhealthy 2 can begin to believe that they alone are the only ones that can provide what you need. In other words, they are longing to hear you say, "Oh my goodness, what would I do without you? You've saved me. Thank you for saving me."
Well, they develop these codependencies in a worst case scenario, right?
Yes, absolutely that. So,
what's the positive? Give me some positive examples.
oh my goodness, they're charming. They are flatterers. They are the ones that remember your birthday and your anniversary. They write you notes and cards and all of those things. So they are. I love the word befriender because they pursue people. Man, I have some of my best friends are 2s, and it's because they have taken the time to really pursue me, and I'm so grateful for that.
Healthy ones could just be networking machines.
Absolutely, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
And they do. They really do want to know, who am I connected to and who do I need to be connected to get the job done.
Or in it from a leadership perspective, probably folks who would really it would be people first.
Absolutely.
Like I've had leaders that I've worked under that were, people above everything else.
Absolutely.
Which they were a blast to work under
Yes.
as the type 7.
Yes, right.
I love it.
Yes.
But definitely have to watch the codependency.
Yes. Yes.
Interesting.
They're really tuned into the morale of an organization as well. And so they're your cheerleaders too.
Sure.
So you want them.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But they can get themselves in trouble based on some of the things we just talked about, being people pleasers. When they focus too much on pleasing others, how hard is it to be candid to someone you're leading or to be direct or able to give honest feedback if you are really
critical conversations
concerned
are going to be tough.
about you may not like me after we talk about this.
Yeah.
That's a struggle.
Sure.
Or they may want to sugarcoat something in order to not make you feel bad.
Yeah.
So it's really important for them to, as leaders, learn how to make those decisions and be direct and loving, but also, in those leadership positions.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Type 3?
Yeah. So our type 3 is known as the performer achiever. They need to be successful. Yes. Okay. They are very confident and optimistic. They are focused on being accepted. How am I getting approval from others? Am I getting approval from others? So they're also a little bit people focused like our 2s, but in a different way. They're oriented towards success and the goal and looking good as they are becoming successful.
Are these folks that are heavy task oriented though? These
Absolutely.
Are
How'd you know?
Well, that when you were mentioning that's what it reminds me of. The folks that are like would plow right through somebody to close their action list.
My goodness, you nailed it. They are list makers,
good program managers.
Yes, yes. So the great thing about 3s is they are successful, man. It's so important to them. They are great leaders. They are very task oriented and they get the job done. Although they may tend to take shortcuts, which is sometimes fine, sometimes not fine, but their end goal is to finish strong and get that goal done.
Sure.
They are winners. They see themselves as winners. They do not
second place is first loser.
Yeah.
They are highly competitive and
Sure.
that sort of thing. So all this is coming from a place of their core fear of feeling like they might be worthless or a failure. And they have a laser beam on what is needed and how do we get there and how do I deliver it. And it's because of that fear of that failure.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess from a leadership perspective, if they can develop enough awareness to maintain connection with people and still have the task-oriented, goal-driven competitiveness, that's a pretty good combination.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of top threes, and I've worked with healthy threes, and I've worked with unhealthy threes. And the healthy threes are great motivators.
Yeah.
They're collaborators. They want to hear everyone's voice and that sort of three.
And the unhealthy just wear you out with action items, right? It's just no
right.
end.
They don't have time for emotions.
Yeah.
In fact, they believe that emotions get in the way of the project.
Which you just get perceived as this person doesn't care about me.
Yes. And that can be detrimental to a team and a work culture and environment, right?
Okay. All right.
So they really struggle with deceit. And when I say deceit, they're not deceiving you. They're only deceiving themselves. They're so focused on trying to be who they think you need them to be to appear successful that they've forgotten or left behind who they really are at the core. And so the work that they need to do is really to understand who they are and, lean on that.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Type 4?
All right. Our top fours are known as our artistic or romantic. They are the creatives of the world, and they need to be unique. They are hardworking humanitarians. They can be soulful artists or passionate visionaries. They are focused on what's going on inside them and on what is missing within themselves. They're the most in touch with their emotions out of anybody else on the Enneagram, which makes them very empathic. They are who you want by your side if you're going through a hard time because they're not afraid of your pain. They can come alongside you because it feels familiar to them. Because they feel all of the emotions. They are, and that makes them good at being with people. And so people love being around fours. Their fear is of being inadequate or of being plain or flawed. And so this really drives them to be unique or special. They're an individualist. They want to be set apart. They want to be seen as special. And so many of our fours will, they're artists. So they're creative in the way they dress or, the kind of apartment they live in or, whatever it is.
Well, if they're that in tune with themselves and have that, it's almost like they're more ahead of everybody on the self-awareness journey, perhaps. But that also, what's the old saying that with much wisdom comes much sorrow.
Yes,
I think they're
true.
They may also be prone to.
They are.
Why doesn't everyone else feel the same way I do?
Absolutely, that is their struggle, and they feel like, for some reason, they feel like everybody else has this happiness that they can't quite obtain, and so they struggle with envy and contentment.
Yeah,
because they're comparing. What you have this perceived happiness that I can't get. And so there's a kind of a gap there for them.
Right.
And so that's an ongoing struggle for them. But they really value authenticity and connection with people. In the workplace, they want to know, how are you feeling about it? Let's talk about that. They really want to get to the deep level of who you are and connect that way. And they get frustrated if you're not taking the time to do that, or maybe you don't have time as a team or a culture to even do that.
Right.
But they are bringing beauty to the world, and we need them absolutely. Some of the struggle that they might have is remembering that since creativity comes so easily to them, they want to make everything beautiful. And so they want to bring you in, and they want you to also make things beautiful with them. But their struggle could be remembering that the rest of us don't have that.
Sure.
So we can't tap into that as easily as they can. It's not as accessible to us. And so it just takes us a little bit longer to get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the workspace, you just don't have that time.
Right. And there's areas and projects that need creativity, and there's some that just need, the T's crossed and the I's dotted. So it's about putting the right energy in the right place
Yes,
sometimes.
getting that project completed. And it doesn't, I've heard type 4s say that even when they send an email, even as something as simple as an email may take several versions because they're trying to make it flowery and poetic, you know, and, you know, an email is very one-dimensional. And so it's difficult to find the beauty sometimes when you're trying to, but, you know, that can be a struggle.
Yeah, don't let perfection be the enemy of perfectly adequate. Sometimes you need to just move on.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure. Okay.
All right, so let's move to the type 5. They are known as our investigative observer. I also call them the quiet specialist.
Okay.
Their need is to have all the knowledge. Okay. So they are very analytical. They're in their heads, which can make them detached from their emotions. They have a hard time.
I have really good friends. I'm projecting like you said.
I know.
I'm like, I know that guy.
I know. See, it's normal. It's so normal. But they really have a, you know, we all, this is another conversation, but we all have access to our minds, our guts, and our heart. But our 5s really are more detached from their gut, their body, and their heart. And so they're really in their minds more. And so they struggle with that. But their focus is on information and data as well as maintaining appropriate boundaries. And the boundaries part is because they really operate on about a 25% phone charge. We're operating from 100% phone charge. They wake up in the morning and they're already depleted. And I'm talking about energy, resources, emotional integrity with respect to relationships and all those sorts of things. And so they are hoarding all day long. You know, every meeting, every handshake, every small talk in the hallway is just draining them. Okay. And so that's why they struggle with greed, not monetarily, but they're struggling with greed for the knowledge. You know, they spend a lot of time researching this thing. They want to hold on to it and maybe not give it away to you as easily because they know how long it took them to learn. But their emotions and their energy and their relationships is kind of that can be draining. And so they're hoarding those things in order to be able to get through the day. And so you can imagine what sort of situation that can lead to in the workplace. So since they're not oriented toward people, they do enjoy working independently, and then they may struggle to share some of the information that they have. So you may know a type 5 who comes into the office every day, closes their door, puts their AirPods in, heads down. Okay.
Sure.
If you walk in unannounced or without an appointment or a meeting, they may feel a little flustered. Well, you've just entered into their space, and it takes them a while to get back to where they were when they've had those sort of interruptions.
That's right. Yeah.
And so
the first time I was managing people, I had a type 5. I'm looking at this going, yeah, definitely a type 5. And he was the kind that he was so talented.
Yes.
I was so terrified of losing him because he would spend hours just isolated working on things. And I would see him, I would come in the morning and he's there, come in late at night and he's there. And I would be so worried about it. I would try to talk to him and be like, hey, you know, it's okay for you to take some time. He enjoyed that.
Yes.
He was in his element.
That's his motivation, is to know as much as possible.
Yes. Leave me alone and let me continue to do this. And I did. Let him just go do his thing. And he was great.
Well, their fear is of being ignorant or of being invaded. Or the experience of being energetically
invaded
depleted.
for their intel or their information.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Now that doesn't mean they don't make great leaders. Man, they are subject matter experts. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
If you have something, they can get up in front of a large crowd of people and talk about their thing.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, you just need to give them space and grace, like you said earlier. Okay, maybe they're more introverted. In fact, they probably are the most introverted out of the 9 types.
Yeah.
And that's okay because they're getting their job done.
Right.
You know, it just looks different than how you work.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Type 6?
All right. Type 6 is known as the questioner or the devil's advocate. Yeah. You're laughing because you love someone who's a 6.
Yeah, that's right.
They need to be safe. they are clairvoyant planners, and they're very loyal. And so this clairvoyant planning comes into play where they are thinking about the scenario that's happening in front of them, and they are planning for worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
They want to be prepared. Okay. Think Boy Scout, if you want. They're vigilant. They're scanning. They're watching. They're on the lookout for threats. They're wondering what could go wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. They're focusing on where things can go wrong and watching for unexpected dangers, because their fear is of fear itself, danger, uncertainty, chaos. For them, it's more like anxiety. Their anxiety is more about what if, when is the next shoe going to drop?
That's right.
Kind of a thing.
Right.
And
which for my style is just like, oh, come on. Let's just move forward. Have some passion and
yeah,
some
we'll
enthusiasm.
Get to that. Yeah, but when you understand a type 6 is living in this constant kind of space of anxiety.
Yeah. All it takes is for a type 7, we're jumping ahead. All it takes is for my personality style to be wrong one time and a 6 is right, to go, okay, yeah, that's really valuable,
yes.
and I should probably pay attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Absolutely. Right. And so what happens with the reason they're called questioners is because, just in a work environment, this happens a lot, is you bring a scenario or a project to a 6 and they're going to try to punch holes in it. Well, have you thought about this? What if this happens? And then what if they do this? And then what's the plan B?
Right.
And so, you're across the table from all those questions, and you might be thinking, why don't they trust me?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's probably not that they don't trust you.
They're trying to sharpen you.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're bringing their best part of what they bring
That's right.
to this project, because
Yes.
they want the same thing you do.
I don't know how many times and I see it now that I've worked with people that are this type,
Mm-hmm.
and they just come across as adversarial. It's just continuous adversarial behavior,
And
they're really trying to help you.
well, but let's remember, an unhealthy 6 is adversarial.
Mm-hmm.
But a healthy 6 notices that behavior, understands how it's affecting others, and they've learned how to soften it
Yeah, or balance it.
and balance it,
Right.
and still get what needs to have,
Right,
happen.
right.
But they're able to.
Yeah. If you're a type 6, or if I was a type 6 going into an important meeting, I would probably want to align with some people. Usually we would tell people, if there's critical folks coming to a meeting, you need to go align with them in advance. If I'm a type 6 and I know I can hijack people's meetings with my devil's advocate behavior,
Yes.
it might be good for me to go align with those folks in advance. So
sure.
Otherwise I develop the reputation of being the guy that does this.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right. And so it can be, for some people who are focusing on those obstacles all the time, it can become a cry wolf scenario where your team stops listening to you.
Yeah.
Because everything is dangerous and
Right.
awful. You're awfulizing and catastrophizing everything.
Right.
And so absolutely that's not your desire, but when you begin to see that that's happening, you can rein it in.
Yeah.
You can capture it, like I said earlier.
Right.
And so then you can become a more valuable part of the team. 6s also struggle with analysis paralysis. Have you ever heard that term?
Oh, many times.
Yes.
Yeah, I know some of
Yeah.
those too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they get so mired up in analyzing something from every angle that it paralyzes them, and they're
Yeah.
unable to take action. And
Yeah.
so, they don't trust themselves.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about jobs that I've had in the past where I wasn't successful. And I'm going, that's because the folks leading were 6s and I'm 7s. And I'm going, oh, good grief. Can we move forward, please?
Okay, ready to talk about you?
Yeah, and I guess I'll tell listeners I've given Marianne permission to just attack me all you want.
I'm going to be very kind, because I'm also married to a 7. And I tell him all the time, I'm a 1. I don't think we've said that yet. I struggle to have fun. Fun is not in my top 10 things of what I'm planning to do today.
Yeah.
Okay. Fun is the number one thing a 7's going to do
Yeah.
today. And probably there's nothing else on that list.
No, everything else is just junk that I got to do to get to the...
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I tell my husband, that's why I married you. I need you to make me have fun. So our optimistic enthusiast needs to have fun. They are adventurers and they're planners. They want to experience everything possible that is new, stimulating, exciting, and pleasurable.
Check.
Yes.
Yeah, me, also me.
They're focusing on what makes them feel good, and they're trying to find ways to sustain that at all costs, because their core desire is to be happy and satisfied and content. But their fear, and this is important, I don't know if anybody's been listening and noticing I'm throwing in a fear for each of these types, is that all of this big fun behavior is coming out of their fear of experiencing sadness or emotional pain or of being bored.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with being bored. 7 doesn't understand what I just said right there.
I have a hard time sitting still.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they actually have an unconscious belief that if they start feeling bad, that it might never stop. So they don't even begin to go there. So they are filling their lives with fun, stories, experiences, adventures, new projects, all the things, and they've got lots of plates spinning in the air all at the same time sometimes, which can look like a gluttonous sort of behavior. So their core weakness is of gluttony, and that is not necessarily related to food. It can be, okay, but it's absolutely related to those positive experiences that they are filling their life with. And so the struggle is that if you are constantly in this frenetic state of go, 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 busy, 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 get to the point, let's go, you have pushed aside what is real, what is really happening, what is the reality that's actually happening right now. What do I need to deal with as a grown-up? You mean I have to pay my taxes? Yes, pay your taxes. You can't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. An unhealthy 7 doesn't pay their taxes.
Because they can just be dreamers, right?
Yes, they are.
And I've been told that, which I always thought was funny because I'm so cynical in general. How can you have a cynical dreamer?
Oh.
Well, they exist.
Yes.
I have evidence of that. But
yes.
It is a weird mix. And I also find myself, Jamie and I were just discussing maybe a couple weeks ago, and so she's a 6, and so she's sitting here talking about some potential fear, anxiety, potential problems, and you bring that to a 7, and all I hear is wah, 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 wah.
Yes,
wah,
they do
wah,
not
wah.
understand fear.
I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
No, because you plow through it.
And I stopped, and you got to repeat all that because my brain just went, I don't want to hear this, right? And that's probably because I was reading this book, and I'm like, all right, I recognize that in mid conversation that I just tuned her out because I don't want to hear that.
Right.
Okay, let's
because
go back and do it again.
It can be something as tiny as, okay, let me give you a personal example. So I was at home with my husband the other day, and I had it's August. I had a blanket on and my house shoes and all my clothes. Sorry. And I'm walking around the house freezing. And I went over to the thermostat and I said, oh my gosh, no wonder it's 67 degrees in here. What is going on? And he looked at me, he goes, that's perfect. And I was like, wait, now what? What do you mean that's perfect? He goes, well, that's perfect. I said, did you not get that I'm miserable right now? Can you just come toward me and say, oh, well, no wonder you're cold. But because he did not want to deal with the fact that I had a complaint.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Next.
I'm a silver liner thinker. I'm going to spin it.
Yeah.
That's what our 7s.
Yeah. That sounds right.
So he did not he couldn't even enter into that. Right.
Yeah.
So,
I catch myself doing it now. Now that I'm aware of it, at least I go, all right, you're tuning this out. You probably should pay attention.
Yeah, not everything is great.
Right.
Sometimes I'm cold.
Yeah. And it's been dangerous at times when I would see a problem and I would tell myself a different story.
Yes.
And positive spin. And then you realize, oh, it's too late. This is already a bad situation. So you have to, I've got to balance that piece. We don't want to spend too much time on 7 because I could sit there and talk about this one all day.
But you're right. I mean, that is one of the things I wrote here is one of the hardest things for 7s to recognize is what is reality.
Yeah.
And so in a work environment, when you look too much at the positive data and you're unable to take into account the negative data, you can't course correct, right? And so that's a problem.
That's right.
And so the other thing I want to say is sometimes 7s can wear their teams out because you walk into a room with all these big ideas.
That's right.
And then you leave.
Yeah.
And then they're going, okay, we think he wants us to focus on this one thing.
Yeah.
And then a week later you come back and you're like, wait, why are y'all doing that?
I know I do this.
Okay.
I know
and they're
I'm
like,
doing
but
this.
you said.
Yeah.
And you're like, but I said all these other things too.
Right,
no,
right.
they're just trying to do their job.
Right.
So a 7, you've got to be clear. You've got to say, hey, I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah.
Let me just talk.
Right.
And with no expectation of...
Because I'll bounce around ideas. Hey, what if we did the one thing? That would be interesting. And some people are like, well, that's awesome. We're dreaming. This is good stuff. And some people are like, dude, we have these other things we haven't even finished.
Right. You've
we
got to
calm
complete
down?
things. Yeah. And that can drive people crazy
Absolutely.
because remember, they're not all looking through the same lens as you are.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to our 8s. The 8 is known as the boss or the challenger. They need to be in control. And I know I've heard many people say to me, oh my goodness, I hope I'm not an 8. I'm going to take the test. I hope I'm going to make it so that I'm not an 8. But usually they're the ones that are the 8s. You know, they don't want to be what they really are.
Yeah.
But 8s are great. We need them. They're the CEOs, they're the C-suite leaders. They're great at taking action. They're decisive. They like to make big things happen. They look at the big picture. They're focusing on being confident and not showing their vulnerability. And so they can, since they don't want to reveal that they truly are vulnerable and they deny that, they want to overcompensate by being strong. And their core fear is of being weak or being seen as weak or powerless or vulnerable. I said to you earlier, as a child, early on, they may have gotten the sense that the world was divided into the weak and the strong. And they chose, I'm going to be in the strong group, right? And so what happens with them is they have this lust for intensity. They're big. When they walk into the room, they kind of suck the energy out of the room sometimes because their intensity is high. Their highs are high and their lows are lows.
Sure.
And what can happen is they're so powerful and they have this go big or go home attitude. It can be off-putting to people, as you can imagine. Yeah. They are constantly trying to protect themselves. So even within, communicating, this verbal sparring that you can have sometimes with people, they love that.
Yeah.
That's how they're connecting with you.
Right.
But at the end of it, you feel like you're curled up in a ball.
Right.
And you're like, what? Why are you so mad at me?
Yeah.
But an 8 will say, I'm not mad. I'm just passionate.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so those are things that an 8 really needs to look out for. They've been known to be called snowplows because they will just plow right on through.
Right.
But remember, we need that in the world. Don't stop being a snowplow. Just do it in a more kind, gentler way.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And remember that there are people, that they are people.
You're right.
And that you need to care for them as much as you care about the big picture.
Right.
And so they're, some of the things that they can struggle with is that they don't realize people are intimidated by them.
Yeah.
You know, and so if they can realize that, catch themselves in those behaviors, capture it, maybe smile more, try to be more warm as you're interacting.
Selection of words, I would think, would be super important for these folks, right? Choosing the right words so that you're not harsh.
Yes.
Right, would be critical.
Yes, because they love conflict.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're not offended.
Right.
In
But
fact,
you got to have that tool in the toolbox when you need it, but you can't pull it out all the time. You're going to mow through people.
Yes, absolutely. And they are direct and they want you to be direct with them.
Sure.
They're not afraid of that.
Yeah.
And so if you know that, let's say you have a boss who's an 8, and if you know that they like directness, you can walk into that person's office and you can lay it out.
Yeah.
They appreciate that rather than, okay, well, this happened, you know.
It's efficient communication
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah. So our 9s are known as the peaceful mediators. They have a need to keep harmony. And so they're peacekeepers, you know. They're really terrific listeners and mediators because they have the superpower of being able to see all sides of a situation or a story or a scenario. They have all the perspectives, okay? And so their focus is on other people, not themselves. They very few times are they able to focus on themselves. And they are trying to create harmony and avoiding conflict. They want to get along. They're easygoing. They love everybody. They tend to adapt to others in order to evade discomfort. And what I mean by that is they can merge into your passions, your desires, your opinions.
Lose their identity.
They lose their identity. They believe their voice doesn't matter. And so, or they believe that your opinion, that you're more opinionated about a certain issue than they are.
Sure.
So they're like, well, I don't care. Right?
Yeah.
So they kind of delete themselves. And
I think this one was the others. Like there was, when I took the test, there were some that were like, this is your top one, but this is like a secondary.
Okay.
I think this actually was my secondary.
Okay.
I can definitely see elements of myself.
Sure.
In it. I don't like, it's, this is the player's coach. in some regard, right?
Okay.
It's the person that's going to get consensus from a group of people,
Yes.
rather than the person that's going to dictate what's happening.
Absolutely.
So that, I could definitely see, but I think that, I don't know if that's ingrained or learned for me, but I think there's a lot of value in getting people, what's the term we use, is buy-in. You want to get consensus with folks before you start driving forward.
Yeah.
And that's the real value, I think, of this type.
Absolutely.
It's easy for them to do that.
Yes,
right?
unless it keeps them stagnant or stuck. Because you might have situations where you get everyone's input and you've got 5 different opinions.
Sure.
And so, whoa, which
What are you
one do
gonna
I
do
choose?
now?
What do I
Right.
do now?
Right.
Or let's say you have 4 people that want something and this one person doesn't. Are you going to hurt their feelings? And is that going to
Right.
create disharmony within you?
Right.
Are you going to carry that
Yeah.
and really be fearful of that?
Right.
So a healthy 9 knows how to use their voice, stand up for their opinion, and make sure they're being heard and known. But they also have learned the difference between being a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. So our good 9 leaders are making peace. They're not just keeping the peace. Do you understand the difference between that?
You still got to move forward.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's going to be what's the old saying? If you're going to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs.
That's true.
Yeah. So you can't, no action is not an option.
Right.
Right. So it's a matter of how am I going to, and not to minimize the damage perhaps, but you're going to have to invoke some change to move forward. Right.
Yeah. So what do you think about the 9 types?
I think I can't see a gap. I can't see a spot where I'm like, well, there are these. I find myself overlapping with a couple there, but all of them I can relate to and see. The question that my brain immediately goes to, and I think this may be something for a future conversation. We'll have to see what our listeners think. But I think the interaction between the styles is the part that really gets my attention, because I'm sitting here going, yeah, I know these types. And like we talked about before, like you talked about even here, is like you got to be careful about projecting and solving other people's problems. You got to take the log out of your own eye first.
Yes.
And I'm sitting here going, all right, but how do I change to go interact better with those types of people? Because I'm looking back 15 years ago, I would have been like, this person should just be fired.
Yeah.
I don't know why we hire these types of people. When in reality, you go, oh, that's because they bring this whole other thing and they have a different perspective. And to me, it's really the value of diversity. Is diversity in all kinds of ways, but in these styles as well. You need all of this.
Absolutely,
you need all of it together in some way.
You
and
do.
I think,
you really do.
And then my mind goes, if I'm a small business, and I've got like 2-3 people or me by myself. Like it's even more important to be aware of these types of things, because your staffing and hiring as you grow becomes really critical to be conscious and aware of it. At least I don't suppose you'd want to staff with a little bit of each type, but certainly being aware of it.
It could be valuable. I think, to remember that certain types are naturally going to move towards certain careers or certain responsibilities.
Sure.
And if let's say you've got a team of 2 or 3 people and that all of them are in the head center of intelligence, you might want to bring somebody in who's from the heart center of intelligence. Of course, that's another conversation we were talking about. But
nobody comes in with their resume with their type on here, though.
No.
I mean, that's the tricky part. I was also, while we're discussing, I'm thinking about years of interview questions where I'm really trying to identify these personality types if there's a specific thing that I'm looking for. Now, in reality, you can make it work with all of those things.
You should.
You should. So it really shouldn't make a difference. You're really just looking for the unhealthy characteristics.
Well, there is something to be said about asking a 7 to be in a room by themselves and do data entry.
Yeah.
That could be a struggle and really not fair.
Yeah.
So,
but it's also on them to know that about themselves.
Yes.
And so I think that's the part that we should internalize is knowing myself. It will allow me to, like we've said before on the podcast, your development plan is your responsibility, not your boss's.
Yes.
You have to take ownership of your development plan. And I think this is a good first step that everybody should probably do to be aware. At least it gives you a tool to get you started.
Yes.
Of how to start to think about these questions, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think one of the things that we haven't talked a whole lot about is the importance of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, talk about that.
So EQ has become kind of a replacement for IQ in some work environments these days. Our culture is moving more and more toward that, I believe. And so
what does that mean?
Yeah, so that's the ability to understand who you are and have empathy for others. So it's empathy, you know. It's the value of these softer skills such as wisdom, you know, how to be diplomatic, those sorts of things.
And to control your emotions.
Yes.
Certainly, that's the context that I've had with emotional intelligence is early in my career. It's tough to not get fighting mad over nanoamps or whatever the crazy detailed thing is.
Right. The thing is, there's no space for that in the workplace.
There's none. Yeah.
There's really not.
Yeah.
And so you've got to rein that in.
Absolutely.
And you really can't unless you know where it's coming from.
Sure.
Why is this ticking me off,
Right.
but not my buddy over here?
Yeah.
Well, because you are looking through a different lens.
Right.
You're addressing the world in a different way. And so, yes, I just, self-awareness, it's about having a growth mindset.
Yeah.
I don't care how old you are. I mean, I'm 57 years old. I'm still in a growth mindset. And I am constantly wanting to learn more, be better, be more knowledgeable, you know, about the things that I'm interested in.
Sure.
But I'm sad I didn't find the Enneagram much earlier in my life. This is relatively new to me in the last 5 years, and it has just made a huge difference in how I love and care for myself, but also how strong my relationships are. The relationships that I have even with my husband or my children, those I'm closest to. The Enneagram just really has allowed a lot of growth there as well. So it's really beautiful.
I think we will have to have you back to talk about the communication side of things.
Okay.
Right. I think that's the interaction between them, I think, is important. And then I know there's a whole other layer of the onion to peel that gets into the communication piece. And but like I said, it's a lot of content to put out there.
Yeah.
So
I would say if you have liked what you heard today and you are interested in learning more, there is a fabulous book out there that you need to read, and it's written by Beatrice Chestnut. She's a PhD and an expert on the Enneagram. She wrote a book called The 9 Types of Leadership. And so her book is just full of stories and scenarios and situations of all kinds of things you would need in the workplace. First, after you've discovered your own core type, and then being able to use it with the people that you work with. So if you are a manager and you know you're a type 3, but you suspect, or maybe you know that you have a teammate or someone you manage who's a type 6, then she goes into great detail about what does the 6 need from you to feel seen, to feel appreciated, to be known. What does the 6 not appreciate about being led in certain ways? So it really goes into great detail and gives you fabulous tools. That's
what I've enjoyed about the book so far is even if I don't know what someone's type is, it helps me understand the possible wirings.
Yes.
The reasons why a person can be wired a certain way, and then I look at them as human.
Oh, I love that.
And then once I see them as human, the approach that I take is very different.
Yes.
Right? Because then I go, all right, how do I interact with this human as opposed to what's wrong with them?
Yes, I know.
It's very different, right?
Yeah.
So, Marianne, I think this is really going to be helpful for people and very powerful. And we will have to do a round 2.
I'd love that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Brent, when I found fascinating about taking the Enneagrams is that you and I were very, very different in our primary personality type, but our second one was number 9, peacekeeper, for both of us. And I think that may have been what helped us
maybe
in our
there's
marriage.
enough common thread with one of them that make us work for. They also say opposites attract, so maybe it's okay in that regard.
Very true.
Yep.
If you have not already done it, go over to EnneagramInstitute.com. Take the 45-minute test. It only costs you $12, and you will be amazed what you will learn about yourself. Don't blow this off. It really is a great first step to self-awareness.
Do it. Have a good week, folks.